Princess Zarth of the Valdorian Empire never imagined she would fall in love with a human. Her species had conquered dozens of worlds across 3-star systems, their crystalline skin and telepathic abilities making them superior to most life forms they encountered. Humans were considered primitive, barely worthy of attention beyond their usefulness as laborers on mining colonies. That changed when she met Marcus Chun during a diplomatic mission to Earth. Unlike other humans who cowered in her presence, Marcus looked directly into her multifaceted eyes and smiled. He was assigned as her cultural liaison, tasked with explaining human customs during the peace negotiations. What started as professional courtesy grew into something deeper. Marcus was different from what Valdorian propaganda taught about humans. He was intelligent, speaking 4 languages fluently and understanding complex political situations that even some of her own advisors struggled with. He showed her human art, music, and literature that revealed depths of creativity her people had never achieved. When she accidentally cut her hand on a broken crystal sculpture, Marcus didn't hesitate to bandage the wound, even though Valdorian blood was toxic to most species. Their relationship scandalized both worlds. Valdorian nobles whispered about the princess lowering herself to mate with a lesser being. Human media called it everything from a publicity stunt to an alien conspiracy. Neither cared. They were married in a ceremony that blended both cultures, with Marcus wearing traditional Valdorian ceremonial armor and Zarth walking down an aisle scattered with earth cherry blossoms. The early years of their marriage were blissful. They lived in the Valdorian capital, where Marcus served as Earth's permanent ambassador. He learned to navigate the complex social hierarchies of alien nobility while maintaining his human perspective on justice and fairness. Zarth discovered that love could transcend species, finding in Marcus a partner who challenged her thoughts and made her laugh in ways no Valdorian ever had. Marcus adapted remarkably well to alien society. He studied Valdorian history, learned their ancient languages, and even developed a basic understanding of their telepathic communication, though he could never fully participate. The other nobles began to respect him, not just as the princess's husband, but as a skilled diplomat who often found solutions they had missed. Their happiness was complete when Zarth became pregnant. The medical challenges were enormous, requiring the best geneticists from both worlds to ensure the hybrid child would survive. When their daughter Arya was born, she was perfect, combining her mother's crystalline beauty with her father's warm brown eyes. The child became a symbol of hope for peaceful relations between their peoples. Marcus proved to be a devoted father, spending hours teaching Arya about both her heritages. He told her stories of Earth's oceans and forests, while Zarth shared the legends of their crystal cities that sang in harmony with solar winds. Arya grew up bilingual and bicultural, equally comfortable in the halls of Valdorian power and the virtual reality chambers that let her experience Earth's environments. As the years passed, Marcus became more than just a consort to the princess. His insights into human psychology proved valuable in negotiations with other species. His natural ability to see common ground between opposing viewpoints made him an effective mediator. The Emperor himself began consulting Marcus on matters of interspecies relations, much to the surprise of traditional Valdorian counselors. However, not everyone was pleased with this arrangement. A faction of Valdorian extremists, led by General Korath, viewed the human influence as corruption of their pure bloodline. They whispered in shadowy corners about the need to cleanse their race of alien contamination. To them, Marcus represented everything wrong with their empire's current direction toward cooperation rather than conquest. These extremists carefully hid their true intentions, presenting themselves as patriots concerned about Valdorian security. They pointed to minor trade disputes with human colonies as evidence that the species could never truly coexist. They spoke of ancient Valdorian glory when their fleets swept across star systems and lesser races knelt before their might. Marcus sensed the growing tension, but chose to focus on his family and diplomatic duties. He believed that understanding and patience could overcome prejudice. When Zara expressed concerns about certain nobles' attitudes, he reassured her that change took time and that their love story was proof that different species could build something beautiful together. The princess found comfort in her husband's optimism, but her telepathic abilities picked up undercurrents of hostility that Marcus couldn't detect. She began having dreams of crystalline cities burning and her daughter crying for a father who would never return. These visions troubled her, but she pushed them aside, attributing them to the stress of balancing her royal duties with motherhood. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his work, unaware that his every movement was being watched by those who saw him not as a bridge between worlds, but as a threat to everything they held sacred. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would reveal just how dangerous it could be to threaten the family of a human who had learned to call an alien world home. Life in the Crystal Spires continued with its routines of court ceremonies, diplomatic meetings, and family dinners where laughter echoed through halls built for more formal occasions. But in the shadows, plans were forming that would soon test whether love could survive hatred, and whether a human far from his home world was as harmless as he appeared. The first sign of trouble came during the Festival of Three Moons, when all of Valdorian society gathered to celebrate their ancestors' first spaceflight. Marcus had grown to love these celebrations, watching as the crystal buildings resonated with harmonic frequencies that created music visible to the naked eye. This year, however, something felt different. As the royal family processed through the capital's main thoroughfare, Marcus noticed unusual gaps in the crowd. Normally, citizens pressed forward to catch glimpses of Princess Zara and their hybrid daughter. Today, many Valdorians stood with their backs turned, a gesture of profound disrespect in their culture. When Marcus pointed this out to his wife, she gripped his hand tighter and whispered that she had been sensing growing hostility for weeks. After the ceremony, they returned to their quarters in the Crystal Palace to find a message crystal glowing on Marcus's desk. The holographic recording showed General Korath, his scarred face twisted with disgust. His words were carefully chosen, technically respectful, but dripping with menace. He spoke of concern for the royal bloodline, of ancient traditions being corrupted, and of the need for pure Valdorian leadership in uncertain times. Zarath's crystalline skin shifted to deep purple, a sign of extreme agitation. She explained to Marcus that Korath was essentially issuing an ultimatum. Either Marcus voluntarily left Valder Prime and returned to Earth, taking their daughter with him, or measures will be taken to ensure Valdorian purity. The general claimed to speak for a growing faction of military officers and nobles who could no longer tolerate alien influence in their government. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the palace's cool atmosphere. He had faced prejudice before, but this was different. These weren't ignorant citizens expressing casual bigotry. This was a coordinated political movement with military backing, targeting not just him but his child. For the first time since arriving on Valder Prime, he truly felt like an outsider in a hostile world. The next few weeks brought escalating harassment. Marcus's diplomatic immunity protected him from direct assault, but that didn't stop the extremists from making his life miserable. His communications with Earth were mysteriously delayed or intercepted. Valdorian staff who had worked with him for years suddenly became distant and formal. When he walked through the palace corridors, conversations stopped and eyes followed him with undisguised hostility. Worse yet, young Arya began experiencing bullying at the exclusive academy where royal children were educated. Other students, influenced by their parents' prejudices, called her half-breed and contaminated. Teachers who had once praised her intelligence for bridging two cultures now seemed to view her hybrid nature as a liability. Arya came home in tears more than once, asking her father why some people hated her for being different. Marcus tried to maintain his diplomatic composure, but Zara could sense his growing frustration through their emotional bond. She watched her husband struggle with a situation where his usual tools of reason and patience seemed inadequate. The extremists weren't interested in dialogue or compromise. They wanted him gone, and they were willing to hurt a child to achieve their goals. The situation reached a breaking point during a formal dinner with visiting dignitaries from the hegemony, a powerful alliance of militaristic species. General Korath attended as a representative of the Valdorian military, and he made a point of questioning Marcus's loyalty to his adopted world. In front of dozens of alien officials, Korath suggested that humans were naturally deceptive and that Marcus might be gathering intelligence for Earth's future expansion into Valdorian space. The accusation was absurd, but it served its purpose. Several hegemony representatives began eyeing Marcus with suspicion, and he could see years of careful relationship building crumbling in real time. We tried to respond with facts about his service record and diplomatic achievements. Korath dismissed him as a smooth-talking manipulator, exactly what one would expect from a species known for its duplicity. Zaratich stood to defend her husband, her voice carrying the authority of royal blood and generations of noble breeding. She reminded the assembly that Marcus had brought peace between previously hostile worlds, had negotiated trade agreements that enriched all parties, and had shown nothing but loyalty to their empire. Her words carried weight, but Marcus could see uncertainty in some faces around the table. That night, lying in their crystalline bed as alien constellations shone through transparent walls, Zaratich apologized for her people's behavior. Marcus held her close, stroking her silver hair as she wept tears that sparkled like diamonds in the starlight. He assured her that he understood the difference between the woman he loved and the prejudices of some in her society. But privately, Marcus was beginning to plan. His years of diplomatic training had taught him to recognize when a situation was beyond peaceful resolution. The extremists weren't interested in coexistence or gradual change. They wanted him gone, and they were prepared to use increasingly dangerous methods to achieve their goal. He began reaching out to old contacts, both human and alien, quietly gathering information about possible escape routes and safe havens. His inquiries didn't go unnoticed. Within days, Marcus received a private communication from an unexpected source. Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Force, an old friend from his pre-diplomatic days, warned him that Valdorian extremists had been making inquiries about human military capabilities. They seemed particularly interested in whether Earth would retaliate if something happened to its ambassador and his family. The message chilled Marcus to his core. These people weren't just trying to pressure him into leaving voluntarily. They were seriously considering violence, and they wanted to know if they could get away with it. For the first time since his wedding day, Marcus began to remember skills he had hoped never to use again. Before becoming a diplomat, before falling in love with an alien princess, Marcus Chun had been something else entirely. As he deleted Elena's message and activated his personal security protocols, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. If the extremists wanted to threaten his family, they would discover that the peaceful ambassador was only one facet of a much more complex man. Some humans adapted to alien society by becoming more civilized. Others simply learned to hide their more dangerous capabilities until the situation demanded their use. The time for hiding was almost over. The assassination attempt came during the Festival of Crystalline Harmony, when the royal family traditionally walked among the citizens without heavy security. Marcus had argued against attending, sensing the growing hostility, but Zaratich insisted they couldn't hide forever. She believed that showing fear would only encourage the extremists and make them appear weak to potential allies. They were crossing the plaza of First Landing when the attack began. Marcus's enhanced hearing, a modification he'd received years ago during his time in Earth Special Forces, picked up the distinctive whine of energy weapons charging. Without thinking, he tackled Zaratich to the ground, just as plasma bolts seared the air where her head had been. The crowd erupted in panic as more shots rang out from concealed positions around the plaza. Arya screamed as she saw her parents fall, not understanding that her father was protecting her mother. Palace guards rushed forward, but they were caught off guard by the coordinated assault. Marcus rolled behind a decorative crystal fountain, pulling his family with him as projectiles shattered the ornate stonework around them. His mind automatically cataloged escape routes, potential weapons, and enemy positions. The attackers had planned well, positioning themselves to create crossfire zones that would trap the royal family in the open. But they had made one crucial miscalculation. They expected to face a diplomat and his alien wife, not a man who had spent 5 years in Earth's most elite military unit before transitioning to peaceful service. Marcus's protective instincts, dormant for so long, surged back to life with frightening intensity. Using hand signals that Zara-Th didn't understand, Marcus coordinated with the surviving guards. His tactical knowledge, gained from operations across a dozen worlds, allowed him to predict the attackers' movements. When a gunman tried to flank their position, Marcus was already moving, using the crowd's panic as cover. The extremist found himself facing not a cowering ambassador, but a predator who moved like liquid death. The fight was brief and brutal. Marcus disarmed the first attacker with moves that belonged in a battlefield, not a diplomatic residence. When a man reached for a backup weapon, Marcus didn't hesitate. The crack of breaking bones echoed across the plaza as years of suppressed violence found their outlet. The other attackers, expecting easy targets, suddenly faced a human who fought with the cold efficiency of a professional killer. Palace reinforcements arrived to find Marcus standing over 3 unconscious extremists, his diplomatic robes torn and bloodied. Zara-Th stared at her husband in shock, seeing a side of him she had never imagined existed. The gentle man who read bedtime stories to their daughter and composed poetry in her native language had just disabled a team of trained assassins with his bare hands. In the aftermath, as medics treated minor injuries and security forces secured the plaza, General Korath arrived to survey the scene. He expressed appropriate concern for the royal family's safety, but Marcus caught the flash of anger in the general's eyes when he saw the capture attackers. The assassination attempt had failed, and, worse, it had revealed capabilities that the extremists hadn't accounted for. During the investigation that followed, Marcus found himself walking a careful line. He answered questions about his military background honestly, but minimally, revealing only what was necessary to explain his actions. The official record would show that Ambassador Chun had served with distinction in Earth's peacekeeping forces, focusing on diplomatic protection and cultural liaison work. The classified details of his Special Operations Service would remain hidden. But Zara-Th wasn't satisfied with official explanations. That night, after Arya had been comforted and put to bed under heavy guard, she confronted her husband about the man she had seen in the plaza. Her telepathic abilities, while unable to read human minds directly, could sense the emotional resonance of violence still clinging to him. She demanded to know who she had really married. Marcus sat in their private chambers, staring out at the crystal city that had become his home, and made a decision that would change their relationship forever. He told her everything, about the covert missions to hostile worlds where diplomacy had failed and force was the only language understood, about the classified operations that had prevented 3 different wars before they could start, about the skills he had hoped never to use again after finding love and peace on her world. Zara-Th listened in growing amazement as her husband revealed a past she had never suspected. The gentle man she loved was also a warrior who had fought in the shadows to protect innocent lives. The ambassador who solved problems with words had once been a soldier who ended conflicts with precisely applied violence. The father who taught their daughter about compassion and understanding was also someone who could kill with his bare hands when necessary. The revelation should have terrified her, but instead, Zara-Th felt a strange sense of relief. For months, she had worried about how to protect her family from the growing extremist threat. Now she understood that Marcus had been protecting them all along, simply by being what he was. The extremists had targeted what they thought was a soft diplomatic target, never realizing they were threatening the family of someone trained to respond to such threats with overwhelming force. However, Marcus's demonstration of capabilities raised new questions about human nature that rippled through Valdorian society. The propaganda had portrayed humans as weak and primitive, useful only for manual labor and simple tasks. If one human ambassador could single-handedly defeat trained Valdorian assassins, what did that say about human military potential? What other capabilities had they hidden during decades of peaceful contact? General Korath was asking similar questions, but from a different perspective. His intelligence networks began feeding him disturbing information about human history. Wars that spanned continents, weapons capable of destroying entire cities, military doctrines based on concepts alien to Valdorian thinking. If humans were truly as dangerous as their history suggested, then Marcus Chun wasn't an isolated case. He was a sample of what the human species was capable of when threatened. The failed assassination had accomplished something the extremists never intended. Instead of removing the human influence from Valdorian society, they had revealed that humanity possessed depths of capability that had been deliberately hidden. The question now was whether this revelation would lead to greater respect for human potential or greater fear of what humans might do if their patience was finally exhausted. Marcus continued his diplomatic duties, but everyone who dealt with him now carried the knowledge of what lay beneath his civilized surface. Some found this reassuring, knowing that their princess was protected by someone capable of ensuring her safety. Others found it deeply disturbing, wondering what other secrets the peaceful human ambassador might be hiding. The extremists faced a dilemma. Their failed attack had made Marcus more dangerous, not less. But it had also revealed weaknesses in their own planning and the true nature of what they were fighting against. The question was whether they would retreat in the face of unexpected resistance or escalate their efforts to remove what they now saw as a genuine threat to their vision of Valdorian purity. The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. The extremist second attempt was far more sophisticated and infinitely more cruel. Instead of targeting Marcus directly, they went after what they knew would destroy him completely. While he was attending a diplomatic conference on the outer moon of Valder Prime, they struck at the Crystal Palace itself. The attack began with a coordinated electromagnetic pulse that disabled the palace's advanced security systems. Communication networks went dark, automated defenses shut down, and the crystalline walls that normally hummed with protective energy fell silent. In the confusion that followed, General Korath's hand-picked troops moved through the palace with military precision, claiming they were responding to a security threat. Princess Zarth realized the truth too late. By the time she understood that the troops weren't there to protect her and Arya, they were already surrounded. Korath appeared in their private chambers wearing the ceremonial armor of ancient Valdorian conquest, his scarred face twisted with fanatic determination. He spoke of purification, of cleansing their bloodline, of the necessity of sacrifice for the greater good of their race. The general's plan was elegant in its cruelty. He would claim that human terrorists had infiltrated the palace and murdered the princess and her hybrid daughter. Marcus would return to find his family dead, and himself branded as either complicit in the attack or catastrophically negligent in his duty to protect them. Either way, human influence on Valdorian society would be permanently discredited, and the path would be clear for military expansion under extremist leadership. Zarth fought with every telepathic ability she possessed, sending desperate mental calls for help that echoed through the Crystal City. But Korath had planned for this too, surrounding himself with psychic dampeners that muffled her cries. When she tried to physically resist, the soldiers overwhelmed her with neural disruptors that left her conscious but paralyzed, forced to watch helplessly as they prepared to murder her child. Young Arya, barely understanding what was happening, kept asking for her father. The soldiers found her questions amusing, telling her that Daddy wouldn't be coming home this time. They explained, with the casual cruelty of fanatics, that she was an abomination whose very existence weakened the Valdorian race. Her death would be a service to billions of pure-blooded citizens who deserved better than contaminated leadership. But the extremists had made a critical error in their timing. Marcus's conference had ended early due to the communication blackout, and his transport was already racing back to Valder Prime when the palace shields failed. His pilot, a young Valdorian who had served the royal family for years, pushed their ship beyond safe limits when he heard about the security breach. Marcus arrived at the palace to find chaos. Loyal guards lay unconscious or dead, their weapons drained by the electromagnetic pulse. The crystal corridors that usually sang with harmonious frequencies were eerily silent, their protective enchantments disrupted. But Marcus didn't need technological assistance to track his enemies. Years of hunting dangerous targets across hostile worlds had taught him to read signs that no computer could detect. He moved through the palace like a ghost, using service passages and maintenance shafts that most inhabitants didn't know existed. His diplomatic duties had required him to learn every inch of the royal complex, knowledge that now served a very different purpose. The skills he had hoped to leave buried resurfaced with frightening intensity as he stalked through his own home like an avenging spirit. The first soldiers he encountered never saw him coming. Marcus had learned long ago that sometimes the most merciful action was swift, silent elimination of threats. He disabled them with techniques that left them alive but unconscious, not out of kindness, but because dead bodies would alert others to his presence. Every second counted when his family's lives hung in the balance. As he drew closer to their private quarters, Marcus could hear Arya crying and his wife's voice raised in desperate defiance. The sound of his daughter's terror triggered something primal and terrible in the depths of his mind. The careful control that had made him an effective diplomat shattered, revealing the cold fury of a predator whose offspring were threatened. When Marcus finally reached their chambers, he paused at the entrance to assess the tactical situation. Through a crack in the crystal door, he could see Korath standing over his paralyzed wife, monologuing about racial purity while his soldiers prepared execution devices. Arya was restrained nearby, her hybrid features making her obvious non-Valdorian heritage clear to her captors. The sight of his terrorized daughter and helpless wife broke something fundamental in Marcus's psyche. The diplomat, the ambassador, the general father, and husband ceased to exist. What remained was something far older and more dangerous, a product of evolution and training that had been designed to respond to exactly this type of threat with overwhelming and ruthless violence. Marcus exploded into the room like a force of nature unleashed. The first soldier died before he could raise his weapon. His neck snapped with surgical precision. The second managed to fire one wild shot before Marcus's improvised blade found his heart. The third tried to use Arya as a human shield and discovered that threatening a human child was perhaps the worst tactical decision possible. General Korath, who had planned for resistance from palace guards and royal loyalists, found himself facing something he had no experience fighting. Marcus moved with inhuman speed and precision, each action calculated for maximum lethality. The general's military training proved inadequate against someone who had learned warfare not from academic studies, but from actual battles where mistakes meant death. The fight was over in minutes. When the killing stopped, Marcus knelt beside his traumatized family, his hands gentle as he freed them from their restraints. But Zara-Th could see the change in his eyes, the terrible coldness that hadn't been there before. The attack had awakened something in her husband that she wasn't sure could ever be put back to sleep. As palace loyalists secured the area and medics attended to the survivors, word of what had happened began spreading throughout the Crystal City. The human ambassador had single-handedly eliminated an entire squad of elite Valdorian troops and their commanding general. The implications of this demonstration sent shockwaves through every level of their society. Some viewed it as a heroic rescue that proved human capabilities had been vastly underestimated. Others saw it as evidence that humans were far more dangerous than anyone had imagined, capable of violence that even experienced soldiers couldn't match. The question everyone was asking was simple but terrifying. If one human could do this, what could their entire species accomplish if they were ever truly threatened? The answer to that question would reshape the balance of power across known space. The aftermath of the Palace Massacre changed everything. Within hours of General Kortha's death, emergency sessions convened across the Valdorian Empire as news of the human ambassador's capabilities spread through official and unofficial channels. The carefully maintained image of humans as primitive but harmless partners crumbled in the face of incontrovertible evidence that one man had eliminated an entire squad of their most elite soldiers. Emperor Valdris himself requested a private audience with Marcus, seeking to understand what had really happened in the royal chambers. The ancient ruler, who had lived through centuries of conquest and expansion, found himself face to face with something that challenged his fundamental understanding of human nature. Marcus answered his questions honestly, explaining his background and the training that had made such violence possible. What disturbed the emperor most wasn't the violence itself, but Marcus's calm demeanor afterward. There was no boasting, no satisfaction in having killed, just a quiet acceptance that he had done what was necessary to protect his family. This suggested a level of psychological conditioning and emotional control that implied far more sophisticated military capabilities than the Valdorians had ever suspected. The revelation triggered a comprehensive intelligence review of humanity's true military potential. Valdorian analysts began re-examining every aspect of human history, technology, and social structure with fresh eyes. What they discovered was terrifying. Humans had deliberately downplayed their capabilities during first contact, presenting themselves as a peaceful species seeking trade and cultural exchange while hiding the full scope of their martial prowess. The evidence was overwhelming once they knew what to look for. Human merchant vessels carried concealed weapons that could rival military cruisers. Their civilian population possessed personal combat skills that exceeded many professional soldiers. Their industrial capacity, disguised as peaceful manufacturing, could be rapidly converted to military production on a scale that dwarfed most galactic powers. Most disturbing of all was the psychological profile that emerged from this analysis. Humans weren't naturally peaceful, as previously believed. They were naturally violent, but capable of extraordinary self-control when it served their purposes. They had spent centuries learning to mask their aggressive instincts behind civilized behavior, making them perhaps the most dangerous species in known space precisely because they appeared so harmless. Captain Elena Vasquez arrived at Valder Prime 3 days after the palace attack, ostensibly to check on her old friend's welfare. In reality, she brought a message from Earth's government that would reshape interstellar politics. The message was simple but clear. Any further attempts to harm Ambassador Chun or his family would be considered acts of war against humanity itself. The implications were staggering. Earth wasn't just protecting one diplomat. They were making it clear that humans viewed attacks on their citizens as attacks on their species. This suggested a level of tribal loyalty and mutual support that most galactic civilizations had abandoned in favor of individual advancement. It meant that threatening any human anywhere might trigger retaliation from their entire species. Elena's presence also served another purpose. During private meetings with Valdorian military leaders, she casually mentioned some of humanity's more impressive military achievements. The war that had ended 3 different aggressive species' expansion plans. The defensive action that had resulted in an entire star system being declared permanently off limits. The peace negotiations that had somehow convinced 12 warlike races to accept human arbitration of their conflicts. The pattern that emerged was clear to anyone paying attention. Humans didn't start wars, but they finished them with such decisive effectiveness that their opponents never recover enough to try again. They preferred diplomacy and trade, but when forced to fight, they did so with a completeness that bordered on extinction-level response for their enemies. Princess Zara-Th watched her husband struggle with the changes that the attack had wrought in him. The gentle man she had married was still there, but now she could see the warrior beneath the surface, always present and watching for threats. He played with Arya and read her bedtime stories, but his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, evaluating escape routes and potential dangers. The palace staff treated Marcus differently now. Where before they had shown polite respect for the princess's husband, now there was genuine wariness mixed with admiration. They had seen what happened to those who threatened his family, and none of them wanted to test whether his protection extended to perceived insults or minor disrespects. Young Arya, initially traumatized by the attack, began showing signs of her father's tactical awareness. She asked questions about why some people wanted to hurt their family, and Marcus found himself teaching his hybrid daughter lessons about threat assessment and self-protection that he had hoped never to share. Zarth worried about what kind of childhood this represented, but she couldn't argue with the necessity of preparation. The surviving extremist movement found itself facing an impossible situation. Their assassination attempt had not only failed spectacularly, but had revealed that their primary target was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Worse, it had triggered increased scrutiny of human capabilities that threatened to expose the true balance of power in their region of space. Some extremists called for escalation, arguing that the human threat was now proven and required a military response before it could grow worse. Others advocated for immediate retreat, recognizing that they had awakened something they couldn't control. The debate split their movement and led to several defections to more moderate factions who preferred coexistence to potential annihilation. The broader galactic community took notice of events on Vuldur Prime with growing concern. If the Valdorians, with their advanced technology and military traditions, were intimidated by human capabilities, what did that mean for other species? Diplomatic channels buzzed with quiet inquiries about humanity's true intentions and capabilities. Marcus found himself at the center of a political storm that extended far beyond one star system. His actions in defense of his family had inadvertently revealed information that Earth's government had spent decades keeping classified. The careful balance of appearing strong enough to avoid exploitation while weak enough to avoid triggering preemptive attacks had been shattered by one night of protective violence. The solution, when it came, was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than try to re-hide humanity's capabilities, Earth's government chose to reframe the narrative. They began slowly revealing selected information about human history and achievements, always emphasizing their preference for peaceful resolution while making clear the consequences of forcing them to fight. The message was unmistakable. Humans were not to be trifled with, but they were also not interested in conquest or domination. They wanted to trade, explore, and build relationships with other species. But they would respond to threats against their people with overwhelming force, and anyone considering aggression should calculate whether the potential gains were worth the certain costs. Princess Zarth's love story had become something larger than either she or Marcus had ever intended. Their marriage, once seen as a romantic bridge between species, was now understood as a symbol of humanity's capacity for both love and terrible retribution. The human ambassador who had won an alien princess's heart had also demonstrated why humanity deserved respect rather than exploitation. As the dust settled and new diplomatic norms established themselves, Marcus continued his work as Earth's representative to Vuldur Prime. But everyone who dealt with him now understood that beneath the diplomat's smile lay something far more dangerous. The man who could negotiate trade agreements with infinite patience was the same man who had eliminated an entire squad of soldiers to protect his family. The galaxy was learning a lesson that humans had known for millennia. The most dangerous predators were often those who appeared most civilized, and threatening their young was the quickest way to discover just how misleading appearances could be. Princess Zarth of the Valdorian Empire never imagined she would fall in love with a human. Her species had conquered dozens of worlds across 3-star systems, their crystalline skin and telepathic abilities making them superior to most life forms they encountered. Humans were considered primitive, barely worthy of attention beyond their usefulness as laborers on mining colonies. That changed when she met Marcus Chun during a diplomatic mission to Earth. Unlike other humans who cowered in her presence, Marcus looked directly into her multifaceted eyes and smiled. He was assigned as her cultural liaison, tasked with explaining human customs during the peace negotiations. What started as professional courtesy grew into something deeper. Marcus was different from what Valdorian propaganda taught about humans. He was intelligent, speaking 4 languages fluently, and understanding complex political situations that even some of her own advisors struggled with. He showed her human art, music, and literature that revealed depths of creativity her people had never achieved. When she accidentally cut her hand on a broken crystal sculpture, Marcus didn't hesitate to bandage the wound, even though Valdorian blood was toxic to most species. Their relationship scandalized both worlds. Valdorian nobles whispered about the princess lowering herself to mate with a lesser being. Human media called it everything from a publicity stunt to an alien conspiracy. Neither cared. They were married in a ceremony that blended both cultures, with Marcus wearing traditional Valdorian ceremonial armor and Zarth walking down an aisle scattered with earth cherry blossoms. The early years of their marriage were blissful. They lived in the Valdorian capital, where Marcus served as Earth's permanent ambassador. He learned to navigate the complex social hierarchies of alien nobility while maintaining his human perspective on justice and fairness. Zarth discovered that love could transcend species, finding in Marcus a partner who challenged her thoughts and made her laugh in ways no Valdorian ever had. Marcus adapted remarkably well to alien society. He studied Valdorian history, learned their ancient languages, and even developed a basic understanding of their telepathic communication, though he could never fully participate. The other nobles began to respect him, not just as the princess's husband, but as a skilled diplomat who often found solutions they had missed. Their happiness was complete when Zarth became pregnant. The medical challenges were enormous, requiring the best geneticists from both worlds to ensure the hybrid child would survive. When their daughter Arya was born, she was perfect, combining her mother's crystalline beauty with her father's warm brown eyes. The child became a symbol of hope for peaceful relations between their peoples. Marcus proved to be a devoted father, spending hours teaching Arya about both her heritages. He told her stories of Earth's oceans and forests, while Zarth shared the legends of their crystal cities that sang in harmony with solar winds. Arya grew up bilingual and bicultural, equally comfortable in the halls of Valdorian power and the virtual reality chambers that let her experience Earth's environments. As the years passed, Marcus became more than just a consort to the princess. His insights into human psychology proved valuable in negotiations with other species. His natural ability to see common ground between opposing viewpoints made him an effective mediator. The emperor himself began consulting Marcus on matters of interspecies relations, much to the surprise of traditional Valdorian counselors. However, not everyone was pleased with this arrangement. A faction of Valdorian extremists, led by General Korath, viewed the human influence as corruption of their pure bloodline. They whispered in shadowy corners about the need to cleanse their race of alien contamination. To them, Marcus represented everything wrong with their empire's current direction toward cooperation rather than conquest. These extremists carefully hid their true intentions, presenting themselves as patriots concerned about Valdorian security. They pointed to minor trade disputes with human colonies as evidence that the species could never truly coexist. They spoke of ancient Valdorian glory when their fleets swept across star systems and lesser races knelt before their might. Marcus sensed the growing tension but chose to focus on his family and diplomatic duties. He believed that understanding and patience could overcome prejudice. When Zarth expressed concerns about certain nobles' attitudes, he reassured her that change took time and that their love story was proof that different species could build something beautiful together. The princess found comfort in her husband's optimism, but her telepathic abilities picked up undercurrents of hostility that Marcus couldn't detect. She began having dreams of crystalline cities burning and her daughter crying for a father who would never return. These visions troubled her, but she pushed them aside, attributing them to the stress of balancing her royal duties with motherhood. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his work, unaware that his every movement was being watched by those who saw him not as a bridge between worlds, but as a threat to everything they held sacred. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would reveal just how dangerous it could be to threaten the family of a human who had learned to call an alien world home. Life in the Crystal Spires continued with its routines of court ceremonies, diplomatic meetings, and family dinners where laughter echoed through halls built for more formal occasions. But, in the shadows, plans were forming that would soon test whether love could survive hatred, and whether a human far from his home world was as harmless as he appeared.